was born about 350 kilometers west of this campus, which is now the Republic of Kosova. But back then, the Balkan region looked very different. The Balkan Wars were on the horizon, and many people were left to make an impossible decision. Should I stay or should I leave? My parents decided to make the very tough decision to leave Kosova and emigrate to the United States in 1992. As you can see, I was only 6 months old at the time, and I had no say personally in making this decision. At the same time, the sacrifices that my parents made for myself and my siblings planted a seed in me. It took about 26 years for this seed to grow and develop and for me to move back to Kosova, but the seed was that if I wanted to have an impact, I needed to go back to my home country and make the opposite trip that my parents did. Crucially, I think it was the relationships that made me make this decision. The relationships that I formed, not only with my family, but over time through teachers, through mentorships, through fellowships, and through different experiences that I've been lucky enough to have as a young adult. At the same time, I think that education is changing. Education is changing dramatically. Now we're looking at artificial intelligence to take over classrooms. We are discussing personalized learning. We are discussing AI tutors. And I think we're forgetting a fundamental element of education, which is the human element. How do we advance as a society and as people alongside AI and alongside technology, but not lose the very thing that makes us human? That's the concept that I hope to explore today with you. The picture on the left, I'd like to start with a story about my favorite teacher in high school, who was Mr. Alshin. That's not Mr. Alshin, that's my cousin, and that's at our high school graduation. And that's me on the left before I realized that I can grow a beard. So it looked a little bit worse there. Mr. Alshin was a strong and disciplined man from Russia. He was funny, he was ironic, but what impressed me most about him was that he had incredibly high expectations, not just for me, but for all of his students. Mr. Alshin took a special interest in me because he knew about my passion for Kosova. I was only 16 years old at the time, and it was just 1 year before the country declared its independence. Although our regions or our countries differed very much in their perspectives about the Balkans, Mr. Alshin taught me one fundamental truth, and that people are not defined by their governments. One day in a current events class that we had to speak about with Mr. Alshin, I was presenting an article. It was my first time speaking in front of a group, and I had a piece of paper in my hand, and my hand was shaking like this the entire time. I'm very lucky I don't have a paper right now because it would probably look the same way. After the speech, Mr. Alshin asked me to meet him after class, and I wasn't sure why. He told me that he was the president or the faculty member who led a Model United Nations program at my high school, which debated geopolitics and international relations as a group of students. While I didn't think that I had the ability to do so, I respected Mr. Alshin so much that I ended up joining his Model UN team. As you can see on the right, I became the president of not only my high school Model UN team, but also my college Model UN team at Rutgers University. That experience of meeting students around the world, of being introduced to different perspectives, and mostly of expressing viewpoints that maybe you didn't personally agree with, was a really interesting growth opportunity for me. As I look back from here, from this stage, I can trace a direct line back to Mr. Alshin's classroom and the confidence that he gave me to get up and speak in front of a group. Another pivotal figure in my life was Dr. Kellerman. Dr. Kellerman was my European Studies professor at the Rutgers University, and I was studying political science at the time, didn't have too much interest in European studies. Because of his lessons, because of his readings, I became much more interested in Europe and wanted to know more about the region that I came from. I remember one day in passing, I mentioned to Dr. Kellerman that my dream was to attend the University of Oxford. I had already been accepted into a 2-year teaching and leadership development program, and Oxford was just a dream that seemed unattainable. Dr. Kellerman disagreed. He had taught at the university himself a few years prior, and he encouraged me to apply. I applied, and about 2 months later, I remember receiving the notification letter on my phone and throwing the phone across the room in excitement because I couldn't believe I had actually been accepted. Now, I think part of my own work was the reason why I was accepted, but I also think that Dr. Kellerman's recommendation letter played a pretty big role. His belief in me, his support, is something that I don't think can be emulated by artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence can't recognize self-doubt in a student who doesn't want to apply to the university of their dreams. They can't recognize the feedback that a student might need to motivate them after failing a test or failing an exam. The human connection that we develop in education is what we need to make sure that we cultivate and ensure stays as we progress as societies. A few years later, I found myself on the other side of the equation. I had been out to dinner with a friend and a few colleagues when I received a phone call from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I had never been to Minneapolis, and at the time in the US, there were spam calls basically 10 times per day. But for some reason, I decided to pick up the phone that day. On the other end, I heard, "Mr. Gashi, it's JC. I just want to let you know that I'm graduating high school tomorrow, and you're one of the reasons for that." It's difficult to describe how I felt in that moment. JC was one of my favorite students in the high school I taught at in Memphis, Tennessee, and we would stay after school playing basketball and working on math problems. I was a math teacher, but I barely understood that speech right before this one. And JC was also, he had a father who worked 2 jobs, and I would stay after till 4 or 5 p.m., even though school ended at 2 p.m., and sometimes drive him home. At the time, I didn't realize the impact I was having on him, just like I don't think that Mr. Alshin and Dr. Kelman realized the impact they were having on me. But education, to me, is about a lot more than learning and a lot more than memorization. It's about a connection that is formed between 2 people, by multiple people, that's cultivated through discussion, that's cultivated through human interactions, and that's cultivated through experiences. Of course, I don't think that education is something that is just confined to classrooms. I think that we develop and grow through conversations that we have that are unstructured. We develop and grow when we play basketball and sprinkle in a few little math problems. And we develop and grow when we're challenged by other people to experience and try new things. In 2018, the seed finally grew, and I decided that I wanted to move back to Kosova and found an educational organization called Teach for Kosova. At the same time, it wasn't an immediate decision. It wasn't something that I just thought about and took the leap. It took me a while. It took me about 2 years, actually, to take the decision and actually go. And in that time, one thing that I made sure I did very often was I spoke to the people closest to me. I remember at my master's graduation, walking on the streets of Baltimore with my sister-in-law, and she asked me, she said, "Now that you've finished your master's degree in education, what do you want to do next?" I'm sure many students in this room feel that right now, especially the seniors. I looked her in the eye and I said, "I want to move back to Kosova and develop an NGO." And her response was, "Do it." Now, it seemed very simple at the time, but it was someone's opinion that I really trusted. And I started to realize more and more that I wasn't the only one who thought that education could transform Kosova. I have a belief that education can transform an individual, but that education could also transform a nation. The work that I do leads to that and strives for that. And what I've noticed over the years is that the people that you involve in the movement is the most important way you can actually have success. Today, after 7 years of being in Kosova, I would say that I am more convinced now than ever that education reform is the way to actually improve people's lives. I think about my own personal journey of leaving from the Kosova to the United States and my life coming back full circle, and it was really a fascinating experience for me. While still debating on whether or not I should leave, I remember I spoke to a friend who I had confided in for many different things over the years. And I asked him, "What do you think? What do you think about this move?" And his response was, "I think you're the most qualified person in the world to do this." I don't think ChatGPT would give me that same response. And I don't think that I would have a relationship as built with an AI model that I would have with a friend. So the more and more people I spoke to, the more I realized that this wasn't just an idea, this wasn't just a dream, this was something that I could actually realize. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my parents in this talk. My mom initially did not want me to leave the US, I think for obvious reasons, and for a while I resented it. I didn't understand why my mom didn't want me to pursue my dreams and take on this incredible challenge. As I've gotten older and hopefully a little bit wiser, I think I've come to understand my mom a little bit better. Her problem is that she didn't want her son to be far away from her. She didn't want me to live 7,500 kilometers away. As much as she loved the country and loved the mission, she wanted her son to be close to her. My father was a journalist who dedicated his life to Kosova and telling the truth about what was happening in the Balkans during the 1990s. He's not with us anymore, but of all the people in my life and all the relationships I've found, I think he's the one person who taught me what it is to live with purpose, and I'm very lucky to feel today that I do live with a purpose. As we move forward, I think that education needs to understand the importance of the human element. Connections that we form with mentors, connections that we form with teachers, connections that we form with family members are what help us grow and develop. I believe that AI and artificial intelligence in general can support learning, but I'm afraid that it's starting to replace learning. I believe that learning happens through discussion. Learning happens in lecture halls like this. Learning happens through human interactions that happen on a day-to-day basis. As we move further and further away from that, I think we have to place a stronger emphasis as education systems on mentorship, on leadership, and on interactions between and amongst us. As we move forward, I believe that artificial intelligence will become more and more, will have more and more of an impact on our education systems and our schools. At the same time, I think that we can work with teachers, we can work with professionals to understand that the human interactions that happen in classrooms are where the learning actually happens. Tools and resources that are online should support learning. They should not replace learning. To me, all of these stories highlight one fundamental truth. Education is about relationships. The relationships that are formed throughout our lives and help us make decisions. From my parents' decision to leave Kosova 30 years ago, to my friends and family supporting me to pursue my dreams, I feel that my life has come full circle in the last 30 years. I have been able to experience learning, development in a totally different region, a totally different part of the world, and now bring all of my learnings and all of my knowledge back to where it all began in 1991. I'd like to end with a thought on lifelong learning. To me, education is not a means to an end. It's a cycle of development that continues throughout our lives. AI can support a student in preparing for an exam, but it can't recognize the fear in a child's voice before they take that exam. AI tutors can give you instant feedback, but they can't look a child in the eye and say, "I believe in you." The human element of education is something that we can't lose. As we embrace technology, as we embrace artificial intelligence, and as it pushes us forward as societies, I believe that it is incredibly important for us to remember what makes us human in the first place. The learning, the love, the relationships, and the support that we all get from and with each other. Thank you.